Hello there. I am so glad you're here tonight because this show is going to combine a lot of things that I am really interested in. I've got one of my favorite guests. She's been on me with me once before, and I enjoyed her so much that with all of the things going on and with her new book that's come out, I just thought that this would be an excellent time to have her back on and have a conversation with her. It is Dr. Irena Scott. She is an author, she's a researcher, she has written several books. And one of the things that I like the most is that one of them, Uncle, My Journey with John Purdue, the Founders Series, relevant to Purdue University and her family, Inside the Lightning Ball, which we have not talked about yet. And I really would like to have that conversation. That's Inside the Lightning Ball, Scientific Study of Lifelong UFO Experiencers. There's a lot. And a title also that I love, God is a Woman, The Last Taboo and Hidden Secrets at the Millennium. And she has now written another book. Well, there's several. She's got, I just completely lost that. There we go. Aliens in the Apocalypse, Beyond Reasonable Doubt. And her latest, Pascagoula, The Ultimate Close UFO Encounter. And that is about my friend, Calvin Parker, and his friend also, when they had skipped out of work to go fishing, but she's going to tell us all about that. So I'm not going to jump on her bandwagon because this is such a blessing to have her with us tonight. And for those that think I forgot, I hope your Thanksgiving was wonderful. We had a great one. We had a nice little family get together. It was beautiful. And now we're cold. So I don't like cold. But I do like Dr. Irena Scott. So, Irena, thank you for being here.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's great to be back again. And our last was very interesting.
Well, I just enjoyed talking with you so much. And when our mutual friend Philip Mantle said, she's got this book. And I was like, I know that guy, which he knew. So, it's really a special thing to be able to have you back to talk about that amongst all the other things going on. And I just appreciate you so much.
Well, I do too. I've appreciated Fate magazine since I was a kid, and now.
Yes, we've been around since 1947.
Wow.
So, did you know that the Kenneth Arnold story was the first cover?
No, I didn't.
First cover of Fate. Yeah, it's so cool. I think because it's just a cool, fun thing. And Robert Gorman says, "I'm so excited for this show," and I am too. He also says that you're a very credible researcher and you take interesting wildlife photos. So we're going to talk about that too now.
Oh, okay.
I'm a photographer too, and I do like waterfowl and stuff like that. And Lori's in chat too. And I'm a little wound up, and I'm sorry about that, but I am very pleased that you're here because I'm curious on why you selected Calvin's experience to write about.
Well, I've been working with Philip Mantle on it for the last few years, and he's been working on it for the last few years. But actually, it started for me way before that, because many, many years ago, actually, at the same time the abduction, the Pascagoula abduction happened, well, something happened to me at the same time. And that was, I was living in Missouri and my mother was in Ohio. And that night, I mean, I didn't remember it and I figured it out later. That night, my mother called me and said that she and my father had heard this huge explosion. And I thought, this is really weird. And so I mentioned to her that we were about 3 states away from each other, about 600 miles, and I couldn't possibly hear an explosion that she and Dad heard. And she kept asking me, did you hear this? And I kept saying, no. And finally I went into detail and said, you're 600 miles away. And Mom had always said that if she showed signs of dementia, we should tell her ahead of time so she knows. And so I told her, you're getting off
You're out there, Mom.
Yeah. And several days later, she's a real skeptic, but she called and said there was just this huge, massive UFO wave going on, and that people were staying inside at night and keeping their kids in. And the governor of Ohio had seen UFOs, and one of her friends had one chaser and things. And I was living in Missouri, and I didn't pay attention to it for quite a few years. But later, several years later, I was in Ohio, and I was in the Ohio State University Library. And at that time, they had a big newspaper room just filled with actual newspapers. You didn't have to have microfiche and stuff. And so for some reason, I thought, I just wondered if I could find when she called. And I don't know why, it was just an impulse. And I didn't really remember. I just remembered that I thought it was the middle of October in '73, but I wasn't sure about that. So I walked in, there were all these papers, and even for October '73, there were all these papers. And I thought, well, I'll never find that. And I pulled down a few, and I actually found a little tiny note that said this about a strange sound. And I figured that was it, because then there was a number of articles later about a UFO wave. And so I got interested in that. And it turned out there was this huge sound that was heard over half the length of the country, and it was unexplained. And I did a lot of research trying to figure out what it was. And the state seismologist of Ohio got interested too and helped me do the research. And I published a little paper in the scientific journal about it. Well, then years later, I submitted a manuscript to Philip Mantle of Flying Disc Press, and he accepted it. And around that time, he also got interested in the Pascagoula abduction, and he republished a book about that, and then by Charles Hicks. And then he found out how to contact Calvin Parker, who was the other person that experienced it, but didn't talk about it. And he
was not interested in sharing that. Yeah.
No, he wasn't. And Philip and Calvin's wife both prevailed upon him, and he finally wrote 2 books that were published by Philip Mantle. And then it turned out that there were a lot of witnesses that had also seen something. And Philip is in England, where there's an English accent, and Calvin's in Mississippi, where there's an accent.
Could not be more different.
I was kind of in between, and he wanted somebody in the United States to interview these witnesses. And so I got into that. And in 2016 or 17 or so, but I had worked on this sound was at the same time as the abduction, and I had worked on that way back when it happened. So I had something that happened to me the same time as the abduction, and that I'd spent some time working on. So I was really interested in continuing at the time it happened, and at the time I wrote my paper in the scientific literature, I had no interest at all in the abduction. It just sounded like weird stuff. But then when I started working with Philip and found all these witnesses, well, I was really interested. And so I had actually started on that back when it happened, actually.
That's so interesting because, I have a home on the Gulf Coast, and we had a little paranormal UFO conference down in Orange Beach, Alabama. And my then research partner and I went and presented there. And this was after I had talked to Calvin. I don't think I'd met Calvin yet. I think I just interviewed him, and then we met at UFO Congress a year or so later. But I was presenting different things around the Southeast as, UFO experiencers. And I brought up the Pascagoula case. And there was a woman, this blew me out of the water, Irena, I'm sorry. But I was so surprised because I just thought, what were these odds? This woman came up to me after my lecture and said, I saw that. I said, excuse me? She was like, I saw that UFO because I was on the interstate, on the highway coming across the marsh, and I saw it come down. She didn't see it take it back off, but she saw it come down. So I was just kind of like, wow, really? And, we were talking. I said, well, Calvin Parker is still in the Pascagoula area. So, if you know him, he's still there. If you'd like to talk to him, you can reach out to him. And he was sick at the time, but he was still there. And she would not have been an intrusive person to speak with, because he really shied away from talking about that for the longest time. And I didn't want him to feel like I put him in a position. I let him know that I told her about that. But that was the first time that I had a collaborative moment, not a corroborating moment where I had somebody's experience validated to me. And I just am so surprised that that's the only time that's happened, because I do a lot of UFO conferences. I've talked to people who have had experiences, synchronicity kind of things. But that's the only time I've had an actual second witness talk to me about something. Blow me away. I can't even imagine how you feel with your work when you find them.
Could I ask you her name, or is that?
I don't have it anymore. I do have it, but it's in a file.
Oh, okay.
And I'll see if I can find it for you, though.
Yeah, I'd be interested.
That's been years ago, but I'll see if I can find that.
Great.
I don't give it away, much to my husband's chagrin. But it's in my office, so he doesn't get to fuss. Or it doesn't do any good. So, but I did not know about that Ohio incident, for lack of a better term. How widespread was the experience?
Sound started in Iowa and traveled across the country and wound up around Washington, D.C. It was about half the length of the country. And it was kind of wide in places too. I think I could trace it to newspapers, and it was like from New York down to Tennessee in width. It covered a huge area.
Wow.
And nobody could explain it. It was way bigger than a jet sonic boom. They called it a sonic boom, but it was way larger than anything from a jet.
Well, and that wouldn't have gone that far either, not north to south at least. If it were traveling east, it could have perpetuated, but not. It couldn't have gone both ways.
It started in Iowa, and I could time it on the newspapers, because it just seemed like everybody called the newspapers and the police and everything else about it, because there were lots of sonic booms then, but this was a lot different. And you could just follow the newspaper reports, but also it was on 2 seismographs, and so I could get a good estimation of its speed and things like that.
That's just wild. Oh, and Robert said skyquakes were common during the 1973 flap. would that be, since it created a seismic experience, I guess that's what you would call that.
Well, it was something different from anything else because I think
Wow.
I think it was the largest, second most widespread audible sound ever. I mean, next to a volcano explosion.
That just blows me out of the water that it was that widespread. I'm sorry. I'm just
Well, they
blown
couldn't
away.
explain it at all. They didn't see any jets or anything else that could have caused it. I mean, a jet wouldn't cause it anything that big anyway.
Well, not that widespread, surely.
No.
I mean, because even with the sonic booms that I've heard, they're there and then they're gone. I mean, because it's actually the initial breaking of the barrier that creates that. It's not something that.
Well, it swept across the country.
Yes, but that's so cool. I'm sitting here trying to analyze, the sonic booms that I've heard and the things that I've read about them, and friends of mine have photographed them, which is so cool because you can see and I'm going to finish that thought for people that don't know. You can actually see the disruption of the air when a plane goes sonic or supersonic, and that's what creates the sonic boom that we hear. So you can actually get a visual on it if you're a really good and fast photographer, which one of my friends is. He's brilliant. So, so he has a great image of that. But I can't imagine a boom going, because it's just the initial breaking of the barrier that creates the boom. So that's cool. I'm trying to analyze that. And
one of my books, I went into a whole lot of detail with the newspaper articles and the seismographs and everything else, and calculated its speed and different things. But it happened just about the same time as the abduction, which was pretty interesting.
It is.
It wasn't where the abduction was, but a lot of people saw UFOs at the same time as that sound. I mean, besides the Pascagoula, with a whole lot of sightings, there were a whole lot of sightings north of that, like where the sound was too.
Right. You surprised me a lot when we spoke the first time, but now you've just blown me out of the water. This is so cool. I love this stuff. I love learning. So, well, when you reached out to Calvin, was he interested? Was he easy to get to talk to you?
I didn't meet him. I started working with Philip when Calvin was ill, and so I didn't make the effort to try to meet him or anything because he was going through enough without anybody else. But Philip and I wrote books together and things, and really, I think it really helped him to find out there were so many other witnesses, and he had worried all this time that nobody else saw anything. They sure did see things.
How many did you find?
This is a book I wrote earlier, Beyond Pascagoula, and that I went into a whole lot of detail about the sound. There were a lot of witnesses. It turned out that the sheriff's department there, at that time, the person that answered the phone at the sheriff's department told Philip that on that day in Pascagoula, when the abduction happened, that he'd heard about 50 reports from people, and there were other reports from people crossing the bridge. And so there were a whole lot of And it was hard to report then, because if you reported, everybody made fun of you, and there wasn't any place to report. They had Charles had to try to report about 3 times before he got to anybody. But then we started investigating too, and we found approximately 50 more people. So there's maybe 100 witnesses, just as an estimate. There were a whole lot of people that saw something, and a number of the sightings were at the same time as the abduction.
Wasn't there, I may be mistaken in this memory, but I think I'm right, that there was a young couple that was kind of parking and were out of the car, and the young woman saw an underwater, an alien or a creature similar to Calvin's description, but underwater.
Yeah, that was. I think you're talking about Maria Blair,
Yes.
and she was the first witness I interviewed, and how we met her was Calvin had been on YouTube, and there were a lot of comments afterwards, very many comments, and one woman said that she knew it was right because her parents saw it. And Philip contacted her and got the name of her parents, who were Mary and Jerry Blair. Well, he gave me Mary Blair to contact. And this was just a witness. I mean, I never thought about it as anything else, and I interviewed her. And she said that she and her husband were on a pier, and they were back from a pier, and they were waiting for a ship to come in because her husband was going off with his supervisor to work on some rigs and things, or transport things out to him. And the supervisor was late, and so they were sitting in their car by the pier, and she said she just saw this thing flying around, and she couldn't figure out what it was. She thought it was an airplane. And but she kept saying it didn't go anyplace. It just kept circling like it was lost, and like the pilot didn't know what he was doing. And then she said about 9 o'clock, her husband decided to take his clothes to the boat, and they walked down the pier, and she was behind him, and this thing flopped up on the pier right in front of her and looked like a human, and it scared her to death, and she was really emotional about it. Then they went down to the ship, and she didn't come back for some reason until 12 o'clock, and she was terrified, and she ran back and jumped in the car and left. And that impressed me, because one thing she was so emotional about this thing that flopped up on the pier, and I asked her if it was fish, and she said no, and a dolphin, and she said no, that looked just like a person. And then I didn't know, it seemed to be a gap between when they went there at 9 o'clock and when she came back at 12. And so I stayed in contact with her. And her daughter had said, well, they weren't abducted or anything like that. Well, her husband was a skeptic. He didn't believe in UFOs or anything. And so a couple of years later, her husband became very sick, and just before he went on a ventilator, he told her that they had been abducted. And then she began to sort of remember some parts of it, but he told her that he apparently had been in some kind of contact with these, whatever they were, and that he was telling them to be careful with her and not hurt her and everything like that. So she was really amazed, and then later she underwent hypnosis and things, but she didn't know they'd been abducted. She had just had this emotional reaction, and then her husband told her they had been abducted, but unfortunately he died, and he told her that right before he went on a ventilator, and he couldn't talk anymore. But she got him in contact with Philip and filmed everything, which was good. And so anyway, there was a reported second abduction at the same time as theirs in the same place, which is probably a first.
Did they describe the same visual of the abductors?
I don't know. I think they described them as taller, but I think when you're under a lot of emotional, stress, you don't exactly get everything straight. I mean, they've been abducted, and the Charlie and Calvin said they were about 5 feet tall and sort of porky, and these people, I don't remember exactly. I think they were taller, but
Right.
I wouldn't compare them. Yeah.
Did they have the mechanical hands like Calvin had described?
I don't think they went into that much detail in them with them.
Because that's kind of a freaky thing to me. You know, Calvin's description of what he saw, it just blew my mind because I've never heard aliens described in that way until I talked to him. So,
well, at that time, I think the picture of aliens were sort of like the grays of skinny little things with big heads and eyes and everything.
Well,
and
because I kind of I have my own back here that my husband makes sure I don't start a show without. But
I was going to get. I have one just like yours. I'll have to get it. Anyway, and so their description of the aliens didn't match anything before, which kind of shows that they weren't hoaxing, because if they were hoaxing, they'd have looked up what an alien is supposed to look like.
Little green man.
Yeah.
Not the Michelin man. I mean,
Yeah, right.
I mean,
but
I've never heard somebody else describe that. Have you? Since then?
No. Well, yeah, there were several others that were, I did a little research, and there were several others that were kind of like that. But I've also looked at, they described them as being mechanical. And at that time, everybody said, oh, that couldn't be. These are aliens. But since then, I've seen in other abduction accounts things that suggest that maybe they're mechanical or something too. So I don't know. It was totally different back then, but I think.
Yeah. Well, there's all kinds of reports of like shape-shifting type of things, and Robert says the bizarre nature of the Pascagoula aliens lends credence to the narrative, and as you said, and I agree, because that would be a tough thing just to come up on your own, where if you were reporting them, you'd report little green or little blue men. If you're just looking for attention and wanting to join the parade, as it were. And I think that Calvin's and Charlie's were the thing of nightmares, because that's just, they were scary looking. A mantoad is scary looking, in my opinion. My little green man is scary looking to me. If I were to see him walking down the street coming at me, I wouldn't like that. But it's just interesting. And Bob also says many aliens or men in black are mechanical in a way. And I know that there's a lot of reports specifically about men in black having that I'm sorry, but having that same kind of visual for people. They don't move right. Their faces don't look right. They don't, I think that's when I first started researching this. I was reading Gray Barker's book or books, and that was my introduction to Men in Black, because I wanted to know about them just in case I ran into any. because I was talking to people that probably should have. And I just thought that was the weirdest thing ever to contemplate. And I think that I just lost my hearing you. No, I'm good. But
Hello?
yes, I'm good. I had lost it for a moment.
Oh, okay.
Somebody had tried to my microphone tried to pick up that, and I'm just like, no, we're not doing this.
Well, I'm getting some odd things too. I don't know if I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Okay. It's like there's another voice on here or something.
Do you still hear another voice?
I'm hearing something that just, I don't know what it is.
Let me figure that out, but go ahead if it's not going to be too much of a disturbance for you.
Yeah, okay. It's okay. Just a minute, I'm going to disconnect my sound here and see if that helps it. Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you.
Okay. Okay. I think I need to replace my sound. Just a second. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what I'm hearing. It's like it's clicking onto somebody else's voice or something.
Oh, that's. Let me see if I've got something going on with my settings here, because if I do, we can fix that.
I unplugged again. Do you hear anything?
I don't hear anything, but I'm going to make sure that nothing is going on. There is someone else in the house, so I'm going to ask him to check and make sure that there's not anything going on, like
Okay.
that nothing else is on where we can hear it. So I'm so sorry. I don't know what it is. I'm trying to see if I'm hearing anything, because my earbuds are adapted because I have some hearing loss, and that's why I use them. So I'm just going to.
It's just like somebody's clicking on a radio on and off or something.
Oh.
But maybe I'll just ignore it and hope for the best.
Carl, are you hearing it? Okay, he's not hearing it.
Okay. Well, anyway, I'll just pick up where I left off then. Whatever I left off.
Sorry.
Yeah, well, that made me think they were more credible, because, if somebody was going to make up a story, they would probably look up what the aliens look like and not
Sure, yeah.
way off. But I did a lot of research, and there were some other sightings and reports that were kind of like that too, around that time.
Well, has that, I mean, that's such an unusual, because you hear of mantis and you hear of the greens or blues, and you hear of the oh please, the Nordics and stuff, but you don't hear Michelin men. I
No.
mean, that's the only case that I had ever heard of, and I just think it's interesting that you found somebody else that, that's just weird.
Yeah.
How long did it take for, I mean, I know that Calvin was pushy about, we've got to report this. We've got to go to the police. You've got blood on me. We've got to go to the police. And Charlie was like, I don't know, man. And then they went, and, thank goodness they had a recording device, in the room with them, because I think that they were going to be sent to the loony bin or something. I mean, that was such a bizarre story to come to people with.
Yeah. The police did a really good job of investigating, because when they went to the police, thought they were crazy and all that, and they wanted to find out. And so what they did was, first of all, they interviewed them separately. Then they put them together and somebody interviewed them. And then the interviewer walked out. Well, what happened? What they were doing was they wanted to test out whether they were hoaxing or not, and so they wanted to record them when they didn't think anybody was watching or anybody knew about it. And so they thought, well, if they were hoaxing, they'd be laughing and say we put one over on them. Instead, the men were just terrified, just out of their minds, having a heart attack or nervous breakdown. They were so terrified. And so the police then, decided that these men were honest. And it's called a mystery tape. I think it's still on the internet, and somebody can hear their voices and what they sound like.
I can't even imagine what I would have sounded like. I would have been in a panic.
Well,
And
they were abducted because they were paralyzed when it happened, and it was a terrifying experience.
Is that normal in an abduction?
To be terrified or be
immobilized?
I think. Just a minute, I plugged my ear. Now, can you hear me?
Okay. I can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think so. But what they reported was a little bit different, because they thought they'd been injected. I don't know if they had been, but that was their impression, that they'd been injected with something that made them real relaxed and paralyzed.
That's trippy.
Yeah. But I think sometimes in abductions that people are kind of paralyzed.
I find that to be one of the more frightening aspects of the abductions, because you don't have an opportunity to do anything to defend you, which is, I'm sure, the motivation is that you don't have an opportunity to defend yourself or fight. Calvin, would have, I'm sure. And I know that at one point, Travis Walton did wake up during his abduction and tried to take them out. So that whole experience to me is just like, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's like when people experiment with animals and do things to them, they inject them with something to make them not move.
Yes. Let's see. Robert says it sounds like conversation in the next room, but there's only one person in there. So I am going to excuse myself just for 1 second, if you don't mind. Oh, and it just happened. So I had sent a message that said, "Would you please come close this door?" And so that's what I was getting up to do. And I looked over and the door was closing slowly. Over. But not a ghost, it's the husband, but still. So, although we do have those periodically, but it just is one of the most interesting things because, like in Travis's case, he was able. Freaky things do happen during paranormal shows. Yes, they do. But it was interesting to me because Travis came up off of his, whatever table bed that they had him on and tried to kill because he said they looked like bugs. And they left and came back in as Nordics to, not get him quite so riled up. And I can only imagine, because I knew Calvin, and I can only imagine Calvin's reaction to that, but they were not, when the experience was over, all they wanted was to get away from it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, they wanted nothing to do with this. They wanted to go home. They wanted to go and get taken care of first and file a report because they had been assaulted, and then just go home and not tell anybody anything else. Because didn't Calvin kind of hide this for a long time?
50 years.
Maybe a little bit of time.
Yeah. After it happened, they were placed back on the pier, and they had some kind of what I'd call, nobody's mentioned this much, but they had some kind of nervous reaction where, like Charles, the older man, he couldn't stand at first. He was down, then he finally got up. But Calvin was standing at the end of the pier with his arms out over the water. And it was like sort of a posture like hypnosis or neural damage or something, where you just take that weird posture. And Charlie had to wake him up and get him out of it, whatever he was in. And then they, first of all, decided, well, we'll never tell anybody, because obviously if something like that happened to you, nobody'd believe you. And, back in those days, it'd be a lot worse. And then Charlie was older, and he'd been in, life and death combat in the war. And he thought, compared to life and death, that maybe you could take the harassment. Well, Calvin was a young teenager, yes, and he had his whole life ahead of him, and he didn't want to go through life with everybody pointing at him. There was a UFO nut, there's a crazy person and all that, so he didn't want to. Yeah. But Charlie finally, he had to contact several people before he was able to contact anybody, and he tried the newspaper, and they said, no way. And then he tried the Air Force Base, which is where you'd think you'd report it. And the Air Force Base said, well, they closed Project Blue Book and all that, and they told him to contact the sheriff. So he finally contacted the police department, and that's where they interviewed him and everything.
I just know he was so freaked out.
And Calvin, yeah, they both were, but Calvin especially.
Well, and, they had skipped out of work to go fishing. So there was that aspect of this too, because there were going to be different levels of repercussions for this happening. And
I think they went fishing after their day of work. I don't think they skipped out of work, but afterwards there was just a huge amount of publicity at work that interfered with everything, because all these people, when reporters were lined up and calling steadily and everything at work.
Oh man. See, I hadn't heard that, but I guess that stands to reason, doesn't it? That would be
Well,
such a big deal in that was a small community then.
yeah, it got out some way that
Hmm.
that they had reported an abduction. I don't know if either one of them ever found out how. I just heard from somebody that said they were reporting it on the radio that night, that people having sightings. So
Oh,
um,
okay. But
because
go ahead.
maybe that's how it got out, but somehow it got out. I don't know how. I think the police were kind of reporting it here and there too.
Well, they were probably patrolling. I mean,
Yeah,
I would hope they would patrol and go and look to see if they could find any evidence of something.
yeah. I don't think they did it right then, but the police were certainly getting calls about it. That people were calling in saying they saw something and reporting it then, and that maybe that's why they took them seriously too.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Wow. Did everybody report it as blue, like the blue light?
I think there were different types of reports. I don't. Uh, just they were reporting something that odd. I don't think they all described it the same, but it may have not looked the same. It may have had different lightings at different times. They might have seen it from different angles and you know everything. So um, some of them were kind of similar. Yeah,
That's, I mean, if he's, what year was that?
73.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that doesn't seem that long ago, but it really was. I mean, I wasn't, I wasn't in high school yet. And I just think that it's, I don't know what I would have done if I saw something. I mean, we saw things a lot because I was outside a lot, right? My friends and I all played outside. We had, neighborhood and such. But I just can't imagine going through what so many of these experiencers go through, and these two in particular, because there was a big difference. There was a big difference in their age and their life experience. And the I've never heard that recording. I'm gonna go find that recording when we get through here, because I think that's
Well,
deep.
Calvin actually started praying. He was so stressed, and then um, later I talked to his wife, and she said he developed a tick in his mouth, a nervous tick, and then he had a nervous breakdown, and wound up in the hospital too. So he was just really, really, really traumatized. But so was Charlie.
Yeah. Well, the you'd have to be.
Yeah,
You would have to be. And interesting, because Robert said J. Allen Hynek traveled to Mississippi and interviewed the two men separately under hypnosis and told the press that the accounts were likely based in fact.
yeah.
Did you?
Dr. Heineck went and interviewed him, and Dr. Harder from the University of California interviewed him. I think he hypnotized them and looked over their bodies for things too, and had a report. And both the professors believed him and said these were honest people that were telling the truth. I mean, they didn't think they were hoaxing or anything else.
That's that is such a big deal. I know that I sound like, oh my goodness, but oh my goodness. you know, I just, when I first heard about this case, I I was interested. I was amazed. I couldn't believe that something like this had truly happened in, the rural South like that. And I'd heard of USOs down there. People would see lights in the water and stuff like that. But Calvin's and Charlie's was the first actual abduction experience in my part of the world that I ever learned about. And then I got to spend time with Calvin and Wynette when we were in Phoenix. And I was, because, we were basically the only three people that sounded like us. So we bonded a little bit. That was fun. And, I was so taken by how obvious the truth was, because I got to hear him talk. And that was my first introduction to his experience. And I was just kind of like, okay, well, this man is interesting and this couple is amazing. But it was truly something that took me aback, and it still does, because I'm down by the water, near and on the water every chance I can get, and that's maybe 100 miles from where that happened. And I watch, and of course now there's military bases, and Keesler is right there. By that Air Force base is right there by where this happened. But they weren't doing stuff like that as far as anybody knew at the time. And I don't believe they had suits like that to walk around in. And I know that that was part of the investigation that everybody was doing, was to ascertain if there had been military involvement there. And I can't fathom what those men went through. So what did you come away from this investigation with? Did you?
Well, my latest book is something I realized later. We'd been, it's like the sound is, there's an echo of me in it or something. You don't hear that?
I don't hear you.
Okay. Anyway, my latest book is this, Pascagoula, The Ultimate Close UFO Encounter, Best Documented Nuclear Government and Mind Control Dimensions. Well, what I realized after we'd done all this research on it and everything, what I eventually realized that this was a nuclear site, and we had completely missed that, and so had everybody else. And
I didn't know that.
Well, neither did we. I just figured that out, and that's why I wrote the book. It's what happened is I gave a talk about it, and one of the people that had UFOs over a nuclear site just talked to me, and then another person did, and I got to thinking and looked over my papers, and there were mentions of nuclear site in some of my documents, and so I looked it up, and what they were is beside when this took place near a company called Huntington Ingalls Industry, and that is the largest military shipbuilder in the country. They were making nuclear submarines and nuclear submarines with nuclear missiles. And so it was a real advanced nuclear site. And, For an abduction, abductions usually, the reason nobody believes them is because they're not documented, and they usually happen to somebody way off in the middle of nowhere that doesn't remember it, and there's no documentation or other witnesses there or anything. Well, in this case, there were all kinds of witnesses when we went to look at it. And in nuclear sites, they often say that UFOs or UAP is interested in nuclear sites. Well, I realized after all these years of working on that this was a nuclear site, and that's what my book was about.
That's fascinating, because I had never made that connotation.
Well, you wouldn't, because this was a shipbuilder, and you think of nuclear sites as, the missile sites with nuclear missiles, or something like Hanford or something like that, or Oak Ridge. You don't think of a shipbuilder as being a nuclear site, but actually, the submarines are nuclear powered. So there's that's a nuclear site, which is a shipbuilder. But also they carry nuclear missiles too. So it's like kind of like a sighting over a nuclear missile site that attracts all attention, but you wouldn't think of it because it's a shipbuilder. Like we totally missed it.
I mean, well, I feel a little better about that. I mean, if I don't feel so bad about not knowing that, but.
Well, we totally missed it for all these years, and I just finally, with some help from people telling me about it and telling me there was a cover-up and things like that, I realized it. And it took me a very long time to realize it.
When you found that, did you feel like you found what was the potential link that brought the craft to them?
Well, they had all kinds of explanations, and that's one thing that was bad on their credibility, because this was like Mississippi is sort of a impoverished. It's not a real well-to-do state.
It is. Yeah.
And you think of
that was before the casinos and stuff. I mean, because the casinos brought in all the income, so it's not as much so as it was, but around it is.
And people thought of these as just, normal people. What would attract anybody to them? And they were looking for, and then nuclear sites get all this attention, but maybe the reason why for the abduction and all the sightings, everything, was because it was a nuclear site that the UAP was taking an interest in.
Well, I find it alarming and encouraging that they are so interested in our nuclear capabilities, because I feel like, they mess with them, and that makes me nervous, as well as the people whose buttons they're pushing when they're, messing with stuff. I can't imagine being in one of those silos and that happened. But, they're also just trying to, I think, kind of monitor to make sure that we're not going to have a doomsday event, or that we're not on the cusp of a doomsday event. And I kind of wonder, is that why we have a comet that's behaving rather interestingly, and, has come from where the WOW signal originated and is doing all this stuff, and that's the third one since 2017, and we haven't had any that we knew about prior to that. So now we have things that are coming from outside of our, neck of the woods to kind of like, So, Robert, did that answer your aha moment on the nuclear? We had a question from Robert that said, "What was your aha moment in your investigation?" And I think that you moved into answering that with the realizing that the shipbuilder, the submarine builder, was there. But Do you think that because of this, with the nuclear connotation to this case, do you feel like that puts it in a category where they kind of are monitoring what we do with our nuclear knowledge?
Yeah, I think it puts it in a completely different category. It's been in the category of abductions, and that's not well accepted by ufologists. I mean, a lot of ufologists accept hardcore things, but it has to stay a long ways away and be monitored through a radar or something. They don't accept that maybe there's something personal going on, and so that was abduction, and then. But this is like a different category because not only is it abduction, but it's nuclear. And the nuclear causes quite a bit of concern because why are they possibly interested in nuclear bases and that sort of thing? And they pay a lot more attention to that, whereas abduction, they just throw it away and say, that's your imagination. Well, and this was an abduction at a nuclear site, which to me is very concerning.
Well, I agree. It's just, and it's sad that these men who had such a credible, in our opinion, based on what we've come across in reading and research, they had a credible experience with supporting witnesses that they didn't even know about. And it took the nuclear facet to really get them into being taken seriously outside of their community by powers that be. And I think that that's just one of those things, that I'm glad that something did happen, that there was, that this knowledge was there to give them a little more, I hate to use the word credibility over and over, but to put more significance on the experience. And Robert wanted to know, because there's so much in your neck of the woods, he wants to know about reports of helicopters and unusual air traffic in your neighborhood.
Well, I published an article in the MUFON Journal. I think it was a March MUFON Journal about helicopters and anomalous reports. And in this, I used flight radar 24, which is something that's used usually to dispel UFOs. I mean, if somebody says, well, I saw a UFO, and then somebody looks it up on flight radar and says, no, it's an airplane. And so it's not a UFO. Well, I was using it to show a UFO. And what happened was that I wrote the report in MUFON Journal, the March issue. I heard an unusual helicopter, and I ran out of the house and actually managed to film it. And then I looked on my flight radar, and I didn't pay too much attention. I saw it, and I didn't pay too much attention to it. But later that day, it occurred to me that in the flight radar, it showed the helicopter is originating where I was. And I thought, this makes no sense at all, because, I heard it coming and it went over the house. It certainly didn't take off from my house, but that's what it showed on the flight radar, which is the electronic information. And it's a place with real good coverage. It's not where they extrapolate anything. I mean, there's good top airports right around the area and things. And so anyway, I became curious, and why would the flight radar show that this helicopter took off from my house, which it's supposed to be accurate at everything where I am. And so anyway, uh, I looked up the backup, and it showed a helicopter coming from the north toward my house, and it showed another helicopter just appearing right beside it out of nowhere, like
Oh, wow.
we'd say UFOs appear. Well, then it showed these two helicopters coming toward my house, and then it showed one of them. It sort of stopped and it backed up, and then it went forward, and then the other one curved around it, and they both went over my house, and then one of them disappeared. And they always say, this is accurate because it's something recorded. Well, I stuck my camera in from my computer and made a bunch of recordings of the backup, and just reported on it that flight radar showed if you saw it, nobody'd believe it. I mean, if you saw
Right.
a helicopter suddenly appear, two helicopters go over your house, and then one of them disappears, well, nobody'd believe you. But I got that on flight radar electronically and got it recorded. So I published that. And it was actually just before all those plane crashes started. And it was kind of funny because it showed a altitude. The altitude was way off on my flight radar. And then I mentioned that in a podcast, and that night after the podcast, well, they had that horrible crash in Washington, D.C. of the helicopter and the commercial airline. And what was kind of interesting about that was that the helicopter that was involved was supposed to be below a certain, like 3,000 feet or something, 300 feet maybe, or I forget. It was supposed to be below a certain level, and it was actually above it, but it looked like the flight radar of everything was showing it was where it should be, it was showing that it was below the level. And that's probably what caused the crash, is there was some discrepancy of showing the helicopter is not where it was. It was above where it was supposed to be, but
Right. Because it clipped that plane.
Yeah. And so I also mentioned that can cause accidents, which it did. Something like that happened immediately, not too long afterwards. And there were a number of other airplane crashes not too long afterwards where the altitude of something was wrong. And
that's so interesting, though. Tragic, but so interesting that you had that anomaly with your case.
Yeah. And it happened right before that, and that really made me worry. I mean, it's why I submitted it to the journal, is because I was hoping to attract attention to the fact that something's wrong with some of those readings. And there was, because I started getting a lot more accidents. And I guess Wright-Patterson's not too far from me, and they had drones that caused them to close down the airport for a while. And there were drones right around here at the same time, too. But that was later.
So were they unknown drones? Were they just drones that were making incursions into their airspace?
Well, you wouldn't think that would happen to Wright-Patterson because it's a top Air Force base, and you'd think they would be able to detect a drone or something. It was kind of weird.
I would think their security is just astounding.
I mean, there were in a lot of drones in New Jersey that they were trying to figure out.
Well, that was the case, wasn't it?
Yeah, and then recently, my nephew, several weeks ago, said that he was at my sister's house next door, and he said he saw a real big car-sized drone go over. And he said it was strange because it didn't make much sound. And I put that on Facebook, and somebody replied that in that area that somebody was flying around a private drone that was car-sized. And later I found out that they may have a way to muffle the sound a little bit so it doesn't make too much noise. So I think that was just some private drone that was flying around, but it scared my nephew.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, when we were having that drone experience, it was crazy. I actually did a show on it with a gentleman, Chris Houston, who does all kinds of government work. And it was so educational because he had good information on it. And almost immediately after that, the activity stopped. And I was like, well, I'm glad I got that show in when I did. But he does do a lot of work with contractors and such. And so I had been talking to people all over the world because it was happening, in England as well. It was happening, all through the English Channel area. And it was concerning on a lot of reasons, a lot of channels, right? People, militarily, ufology was like, oh, look at this, then the, just the general trade shipping was being affected as well. It was hitting all aspects of airspace, underwater space, because there were reports of submersible type craft as well. And when I was, because, I like to look things up, it's just what I do. And when I was researching it, I came up with some ideas and I was sharing them. And, my guest that came on with me, Chris Houston, was like, you really need to have me on for a show about this. And I was like, are you going to hand me the government line? Because no. But it was a fascinating conversation because, yes, there was stuff that they didn't know. There were things, like you said, a car-sized drone. There were huge drones flying over residential areas in Ohio, and in a lot of other places too. But and like I said, there was a lot in England. There were reports of huge underwater submersible craft of some type in the English Channel around the English coast. And it was just kind of I don't even know what to think about this, but I want to talk to somebody who knows about it. And then Chris stepped in and, it was I was educated. I always love being educated by people because there's so many people that know about things I have no clue about. And I do a lot of research, but this was new to me. And like you said, we had the DC crash, 2 of them. Weren't there 2? There was one with the skaters playing, and then there was something else happened. If it wasn't, it was a near miss.
Yeah, there was a near miss, and then there was also some kind of mystery. I can't remember, some kind of mystery signals or something that they were picking up at that airport too. I made a list of it, but I don't have it here with me.
Oh, that's okay. This was an unexpected turn of events. So, channel shift. But, it's so weird when we have so much synchronicity and events around the world like that. What's your take on that? I mean, you've done anomalous and interesting writings and research relevant to UFO, UAP, USOs. And what do you take away from from situations like what you were researching with that. Do you have insight?
I have a drone, and I keep intending to fly it and see if it registers any place, and I haven't got around to it yet.
You'll
So,
have to tell me if it does,
yeah,
because
I've got
the
to set it up and fly it, and I haven't. Um, yeah, I don't know. Uh, I guess people can own big private drones, and I didn't even know that. So
I thought those had to be commercial, so
yeah, I did
I don't
too.
think
But
about them.
or maybe it's commercial people flying around for a hobby or something. I don't know.
Maybe that's one of some of the things that are going over Skinwalker. They're
Yeah,
getting rockets shot at them. But
yeah, I've kind of been
it's like,
watching. I have flight radar on my phone, and so I kind of watch. And if I see something unusual, I look it up. And there's quite a bit of air traffic around here because there's 5 airplanes that are airports that are fairly close, and there's a lot of air traffic. And you'd think people would have their transponders on when they're flying around with all this air traffic, but once in a while I see something that doesn't, and it's sort of surprising. But I
that
guess,
would be something.
and I do photograph something occasionally that I don't identify, but I usually put it on Facebook and see if anybody else saw anything. But sometimes they don't, because just not too long ago, 3 real low helicopters went right over my house, real low. And so I asked all the neighbors, and nobody else had seen them. But I had a film of it so I could prove they were there.
Right? Were they black?
um, let's see. I don't remember. Um, I don't think I paid any attention. I just paid attention. If they were low, and none of the other people saw them. I was surprised because they made a lot of racket. Um, uh, I'll have to look it up. I don't remember the details. I think I put it on Facebook though that they had passed over. And I wanted to see if anybody else noticed them, and nobody did.
That's always, I mean, I'm sorry. If it's something that catches your eye like that, I mean, I'm the world's worst. I'll just assume that other people saw it too and have opinions, and I'm always surprised that when nobody does.
Yeah, I thought that
Because
was pretty surprising because they were quite low. Um, but uh, the area I'm in now is it is sort of like old farms, and I don't have close neighbors on 3 sides, and so uh, things can go over that other people don't see, especially if they're low. So it still seemed a little bit odd, though.
I think it's really odd because, I mean, I'm near an airport that has the Air National Guard base, and so I've seen things that, it's a refueling wing. So I've seen when they practice, and I've seen them practice at night. And I helped design their unit coin. So
Wow.
yeah, and I have one. I know that was my another incarnation job.
Wow.
But I was outside one night and I saw what were it was like barrels, not airplanes, and they were actually flying in tandem. So, and they were lit from the interior, like they glowed. And I thought, and I had actually seen an anomaly similar, or a film of something like that similar, that someone brought to a MUFON expert to analyze. And he said, "Oh no, that's you know what he space station or something. And I was looking at it because it had been filmed out west in a desert area where there wasn't anything. And it also glowed from inside. It glowed green in that video. But what I saw was white. But if you were doing a night vision camera, then it probably would have been green. It was so interesting to me because I was excited. So I was talking to the same person that had looked at that video and said, oh, it's, you know, it's just, that's not anything, or space station, whatever. And so I was like, I'm so excited. I finally saw the space station. Blah, 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 blah. And he was like, that wasn't the space station. I said, it's the exact same thing that person showed you in Phoenix that you said was the space station. And he was like, no, I didn't. And I said, yes, you did. I was standing right there. And I was so excited when I saw the same thing here. And that's why I'm excited and telling you about it, because I'm celebrating that I saw the space station. You know, I came in the door. I was telling David, I just saw the space station. I'm so excited. So, you know, but yeah, the person said, that didn't happen. And I'm like, you're a freaking expert, you know. So I just was like, done with this. And you know, it was a very odd moment. And you know, because I see the space station when it's in this area all the time. And in fact, I'm going to miss it when they bring it down, right? But it's so exciting to me still, because I'm like, oh, hi astronauts. I get excited about these things, you know? So it was so, it took the air out of the wind out of my sails when, yeah, he shot me down like that. And I'm like, well, if you're shooting me down about this, then this is something else. And that means that what that other person saw was something else as well. And it was not, you know, the space station, or, you know, you just made that up. And I cannot imagine how frustrating it is. I mean, because I have the resources that I can call somebody and say, hey, this is what I saw. What is this? You know, has somebody else reported this? Not everybody can do that. So they try to turn their pictures into a reporting agency or try to do something else, and they get, you know, they get hoodwinked or just gaslighted about it. And I can't believe that here we are at this point in time, and I feel like that's happening with this comet as well, that we can't get plain, simple information without having to feel like we're being lied to by omission, if nothing else. And I don't even know how this soapbox got under my feet, but I'm probably going to step off now or I'll lose friends. But I do feel like that happens, and I do feel like it's happening now. And, you know, as an aside, and getting back on topic, Robert said sometimes the show is meant for your eyes only, like in your case. But he says anomalies can be very personal, and that's true too. So
Yeah, that's unfortunate. Yeah, I've filmed things and then I look up on flight radar, and it usually shows, except for that one time, what's going on. And I can also look up if something's a satellite or the Chinese space station or whatever. So I can usually, you know, if I see something odd, I can figure out whether it's something or something definitely odd. But the trouble is sometimes you see something with UFOs. Sometimes you see something you can't make yourself film them for some reason. I mean, a lot of people see UFOs and they don't have a camera, which is obvious, but sometimes you just can't film them.
Well, that's true. And, I have found that a lot of times, even if you do get imaging of it, then there's still never an explanation, but people put down the imaging that they see. And, even without having another idea to offer, maybe, they don't do that. They just are derogatory about what you do bring. That's very frustrating too for a lot of people. I've heard that complaint often.
Yeah, I usually film something and then my camera tells me exact time when I film it, so I don't have any discrepancy or anything. I saw something like not too long ago, something round and going over, and so I filmed it. Well, then I looked up balloons, and it wasn't a weather balloon because I contacted the agency. And there's another type of balloon called the pica, I think, or something like that. It's released, not weather, I forget, somebody else releases it, and it wasn't one of them. And it was going east to west. But if it would have been in the jet stream was going the opposite direction, but I couldn't tell its altitude. But I just mentioned it to several people and everything, but I didn't report it as anything. I just couldn't figure out what it is, but I got a good recording of it, whatever it was.
Well, it's interesting to me that things happen and you can't find a reason or an explanation that's logical. And I had a really weird, anomalous type of experience with something in my backyard. And I was wide awake. I was on the phone with somebody. It just showed up, and I'm like, do not hang up. Just don't hang the phone up, because I was afraid of a lost time incident. I don't want to have one of those. And so, and I tried to report it, and the software didn't work, and I thought, that's weird. But there's things that happen, and when you try to follow the prescribed pathway to report them, it's very disconcerting when they don't work. But in this, I didn't film it because I didn't want to risk losing my phone call. I was on my cell phone, and I also didn't want to get up because I was laying in a hammock. I didn't want to get up and draw attention, right? Because obviously they already knew I was there, but it was wild. And it actually looked like the proverbial pie plate upside down. I was like, you are kidding me. I'm looking at a 1950s craft. Really? What is this? So, but it was silent, which would tend toward, nuclear or a different or a similar propulsion system. And, I was just like, I'm awake, right? I am awake. But it just is, and I kept talking to the person, telling them what I was seeing and stuff. But I was doing it very quietly because, like I said, I did not want to catch eyes and stuff. But hi, Raymond. But it was definitely a disconcerting experience to see something that you can't explain. And like, you with the balloon that wasn't registering. I am getting that flight radar. Is that publicly accessible?
Yeah.
Is it an app?
It doesn't track balloons though, so
It what?
It doesn't track balloons, I don't think. It just tracks airplanes. Um, yeah, I had that happen to me too about several years ago. Um, this was before flight radar. Um, I was out. I take wildlife photographs, and I keep training myself to, if I see something odd, take a picture and think about it later. Because lots of times I'll be so attracted, if I see a deer doing something, I'll be so attracted to it, I won't think to take a picture. And I'm training myself, take the picture and then think later. And so anyway, with possible UFOs, I was out in my yard, and it was a real nice night. It was getting dusk or dark, and there were some nice planets out. I think it was Saturn and the moon and Mars and Venus or something. There were a whole bunch of planets, and it was a real clear night. And I had two cameras out. I had one of my iPhone that I was taking pictures of them. Then I also had a video camera, which was just, I set it up and thought, well, maybe I'll get some good colors off of that. And so anyway, I was standing there with a camera right in front of my face, and what might be a UFO flew by. It was two things. It was two red objects, I guess they were, and one was exactly beneath the other one, and they were totally soundless, and they flew by. I think one of them was above Venus and one of them was below Venus. And I was standing there with my camera, and I recognized this is odd, but I didn't take a picture, which was so irritating. I couldn't believe it. And I didn't take it. And then finally they flew away. And then I took 3 pictures. But then afterwards, the whole sky just lit up in blinking lights. And so I ran to my video camera, and it came on, and it was in focus, and the things were going west to east, but I got it just before they disappeared, and I got the blinking of whatever it was. And so I came in, and I transferred everything to my computer, and what it turned out that I totally missed the 2 things that went across, which was like a UFO experience. But the picture I got with the camera showed about 5 objects that were flying by, and I didn't see anything, but the camera picked up, and they looked white, and it was dusk and getting dark, and they wouldn't look white if they were birds. Yeah. And so I got about 5 of them going by, and then I got the things lighting up. And so I put it on Facebook and things to see if anybody else saw anything. Nobody did. It was before flight radar, but I had recordings, and so I reported that as something that I didn't know what it was. But it was so irritating because I had the camera right in my hands, taking pictures of the planets. And when these things went by, I didn't take a picture, and it was so irritating. And I've trained myself, if you see an animal doing something weird, get a picture, and I didn't.
Well, in all fairness, it wasn't an animal, so
yeah, maybe.
But well, I get you.
Really irritating. I don't know why. I was just so amazed at looking at it. I suppose I just was totally amazed and didn't take a picture.
Well, I think that a lot of times that happens to people, though. I'm a photographer too. I love it, and I'm sitting around doing something, and I get caught in the moment, and I didn't get the shot like that. You're. This is here. I do primarily wildlife and water. And,
Mhm.
you know, I'm a beach photographer. And so
Neat.
I get mesmerized. I mean, it's almost like I'm so I'm so caught up in it that it's very hard to remember that you're really supposed to be shooting that. You know,
Yeah.
you need to catch that. But because I do a lot of light and water and animals where I can, I like herons. So yeah, I try to get them doing heron things in the wild, as it were. But I've caught stuff in the sky. Didn't catch the thing in my backyard, and I didn't catch the thing the other night. But it's just wild. I so wish that I had caught the thing that I thought was the space station at that time,
Yeah.
because I sat there and heard this person that's supposed to know these things tell that man, "Oh, well, that's the space station," you know. So when I saw something similar, mine was not green, mine was white light. Um, I was so excited because I saw the space station. Didn't get a shot of it because my phone was in the house and I'd gone out with the dogs. But I usually have my phone when I go out now.
Yeah.
'Cause- but but I knew it wasn't an air refueling process because I've seen those. I'm familiar with their equipment and their craft. So, you know, it was just bizarre. I think that we are very similar in a lot of ways that I didn't know about. I think that's fun. So we
Yeah.
have similar interests that I didn't know about. But I have seen some of your pictures though. They're amazing.
Well, I have in the daytime my yard just looks like a normal yard, but at night there's all kinds of animals out, and so I have a bunch of night vision cameras out, and it's like a soap opera. All kinds of things go on at night, and I'm amazed.
That's fun. Are they motion triggered or
Yeah, motion triggered.
yeah. That's so cool.
I mean, not too long ago, I got a picture of a big owl, and it was um, trying to scare away a skunk, I think, or something. I think I put it on something on the computer. I don't remember what, but it was strutting and everything, and the skunk was just looking at it. And then finally, the skunk walked away.
Well, thank heavens. If that owl just knew what he avoided, right?
Yeah.
Because there is not much worse than that. You know, that would have been so bad.
The
That owl
owl
could
would
never
come
have
out.
home.
Been
Well,
in for a surprise.
we do not have a lot. We live in an urban area, and then our yard is fenced. But I get a lot of birds. I love birds. I didn't used to. It's kind of a new thing. But we have owls, we have hawks, we have songbirds in season before they migrate. We have hummers. We have a little bit of everything, and it's it's so much fun to get to experience nature.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, because we're dog people, we always have a couple of dogs, and every one of them is just so special. We have two now that are goofy. They're all goofy. Well, not all of them. I've had smart ones too. That's not fair. These are smart. They're just goofy. But it's so much fun to watch because they'll watch the squirrels. The squirrels will watch out for predators, and we have chipmunks that can outsmart dogs in 2 seconds time. They'll be digging and because I have cross ties along the bottom of my fence, and one of them has eaten part of the cross ties trying to dig in to get the chipmunks, and he'll be, focused. The other dog is focused on him, and the chipmunk just runs across the yard and goes back to his den safely. And it's just like, I got to get some better dogs, But I'm glad that that's how it works out because I would just have a stroke if something happened.
Oh,
Damn. But
Yeah.
yeah, things like that. That's why I'm always outside. And I'm always looking up because I love clouds. And, when what happened in my backyard that time did, it came up in kind of a yellow green cloud because the color of the cloud is what caught my attention as it was moving across and there was no sound. It was moving slowly but steadily. And it wasn't moving like a cloud and it was low. And I was like, it was like below the height of my house, low. And I thought, that looks very odd, you know? And that's when I was like, do not hang up. If you don't hear me for a minute, do not hang up. You know, if there's phone interference or something. But I like the birds better than I like unknown things flying that close to me. I was ready to, you know, do something. But it was really funny because an object came out of the cloud, just came forward a little bit, and I didn't see anybody. It had like the portholes like on a ship when you're on a cruise ship, and they were covered with the same material. And then I was like, please don't open that. Please, please don't open that. I don't really want to see who's in there. But yeah, it didn't. And then the cloud caught back up with it, and it just went about its business. So that was my weird experience. But it's when you wish that you had taken a picture.
Yeah.
But I was not messing with anything on that phone. I was not going to be disconnected from anybody because I have in my research and my work, I've heard so many descriptions, right? And have you ever been concerned that something of that nature was going to happen to you? Like when you're out doing your photography and you see something that catches your eye that seems a bit unusual?
If something catches my eye that seems unusual, I try to not think and to get a picture first because I can analyze the picture later. No, I don't think so. I don't think I had any premonitions or anything.
Well, I get premonitions, but I didn't have them about these things per se. They were just so unusual in nature that they were obviously not a natural phenomenon.
When did that
And
happen?
let's see, that was when my daughter, she had not moved to New York yet. She was still
Oh,
here. So she was in college. And that would have been, oh my goodness, around 2019, a little
oh,
before that.
right. I didn't know if it was something recent or not. So.
No, I have not. I have not had something that was obvious to me as anomalous for at least 5 years back there. There'll be things that will catch my eye, but it's not something that I can say, okay, there's no way I can explain this. I find explanations for almost everything except those incidents. And because I'm a show me girl, right?
Mm-hmm.
There has to be an explanation. I'm a paranormal investigator as well, but I don't go into a scenario anticipating that this is that this is not a normal occurrence. There 9 times out of 10, maybe 9.5 times out of 10, there's a natural, logical explanation for everything. But it's that 1% or even less that will make you go, ugh, I can't figure this out. There's something weird here. It's like Calvin had a normal everyday existence until he didn't,
Yeah.
you know, and neither he nor Charlie would have been prone to make up something like what happened to them.
Yeah. Why would they
And
do that? Why would you make up? I mean, nowadays UFOs are kind of accepted, sort of, in a distant way, and so you wonder about people making things up. But back then, you got harassed to death if you said anything like that, and um, I think there'd be a lot less tendency for somebody to make it up back then.
well, I think so too. And, the fact that, I mean, because Calvin was adamant that we're going to the police about this. I'm damaged. We're going to the police about
That
this.
Charlie was. Calvin didn't want to go. Didn't want to say anything about it.
Well, he told me that he did because he was so scared. And,
Huh.
of course, this is
Well,
what, 40, 50 years later. But,
yeah.
you know, but Calvin was like, he definitely said that he wanted to go. And, when they're in the room and the cops have left them in there, they didn't know the recording device was in there. They're arguing about it and oh my God. So
Mhm.
I think that's cool that you have that recording, and I am so, when we get off of here, going to go listen to that. I am so going to listen to that because I've always wanted to. I think
Yeah.
it's cool that you have that. But there's so much that happens, and the way things line up. It's like, I was doing that presentation. It was the rainiest day that there had been in forever, and this woman drove from Biloxi to Orange Beach to hear me talk about that, for the UFO side of the paranormal conference. And I don't think that she knew I was going to talk about Calvin and Charlie's case. I don't think that had been put out there at all, but she wanted to hear it because she had seen that craft.
Well, a
And
number of other people did, that were going over the Route 90 goes over there. And a number of people saw things from Route 90, so she wasn't the only one.
no, and she said it was blue, that the light was blue. And
Boy, I wish I
you
could. I hope you can find the information from her.
I'm gonna try. I'm gonna try my best. That's been several years ago, but I do tend to keep things. I just have to find it. But because every so often I'll move stuff around and put stuff in the downstairs office and whatever, and it'll take a little bit, but I'll probably can find it. And Robert says it shows everything that he had hoped for, and he did offer a useful tidbit or two. But bless
Yeah.
you too. He's such a nice man, Robert Gorman. He is just a brilliant, brilliant person. But and he believes in fate. I believe in him too. I also believe in fate. So I do want to tell our listeners that if you like the background here, the fake covers, our producer Carl has found a way to generate these. And this is from June 2024. And I wanted to tell you this is my this is my research copy, and it actually got caught on something, but this is the new edition of Fate magazine. It has just come out. It is brilliant. And one of the cover stories, The Skinwalkers, was written by Stevie Tombstone, who is a real huge supporter of Fate and our website. He does all of our web stuff. And, it's really terrific. And we've got Bear Walkers, Report on Skinwalkers, UFOs, A Realistic Assessment, which is by Rick Botello, who I know. But, there's so much going on right now. And I think that it's a lot of fun because I'm just mesmerized by things. I wanted to ask you, because we've got about 10 minutes left. What is your take on this this A1 Atlas, AI Atlas, three I Atlas? I'm sorry, I was thinking of something else. But what is your take on the comet?
Well, it's you think of a comet as something that goes around in a big oblong shaped thing and comes back. And this is different from a comet because it doesn't come back. It comes from space and it goes back out its hyperbolic orbit rather than more or less a parabolic or something. And so it's a real strange comet because it's from somewhere else and not on real long orbit around the sun. But it'd be nice if, I mean, since it's so far away and from other systems rather than our solar system, it'd be so wonderful if they could send something up and, grab a part of it, but it's going too fast and they can't, get to it. But maybe in a few years, if another one comes by, it'd be nice to sample it and see what it has in it.
I know. Well, since we've had three now, just since 2017, so apparently we're on a path toward having more of them.
I sort of wonder if back before that there were some of them there, but nobody knew it because they didn't have the precise way to track them that they do now.
I think that's a strong possibility because I cannot imagine that these are the first three that we've had.
Yeah, I can't either.
I mean, it's illogical.
I would strongly suspect that there were more that they just didn't know how to track them back then.
Or didn't know what they were seeing. The fact that they've been reported, the first one was interesting. The second one was like, really? This is the second one?
This is the third one. Yeah.
But then now I'm like, so we've had three since 2017. You don't think there's anything weird about that if we've really never had them before now? What are you thinking? I think this would be weird.
Yeah.
And so, I'm very fortunate. I'm a member of the Scientific Coalition on UAP Studies, and there's so many people that are so smart about this stuff in ways that I don't have the knowledge base for. And so there's a lot of good learning to be had there. And it's interesting to kind of I contribute, my skill sets, but it's nice to be a fly on the wall and hear some of these people talk about this stuff. And it's just, there's not really any argument that there are craft, that there are anomalous type things in our skies and stuff. But I just think it's so cool when we have something like, 3i Atlas that we should be able to glean a lot of information from watching its trajectory and, it's, just everything that we can about it. I think it's such a neat time to be part of the history of the moment, because 10 years from now, we're going to be able to look back and go, oh, wow, that was so cool. But look what we've learned about that now. I love that. So what do you anticipate happening with your work coming up?
Well, there's something I wanted to mention. One of my neighbors about a week ago had a UFO sighting. They're younger people in high school, but there were two of them in a hot tub. And she said she saw something go around a circle and it was blinking. And I should have got a real ask her immediately, and being involved in our activities, I didn't. I still haven't. I need to get the date and everything else. But two people saw it, and they thought it was really odd. And one of them thought she saw a face too. But I just talked to her for a second, and I haven't got the date or anything else. So I thought that was interesting. Now, what was your question about what I thought in general?
Well, yeah, about, yes.
Well, I think, in my opinion, we don't know anything about them.
I agree.
And they seem to like be shifters, like you said. That they can take any appearance, and I think this examination of Pascagoula makes me think that they ought to take close encounters and abduction reports more seriously, because this was not taken seriously at all when it happened. They were harassed and everything else. But it turned out that there were a lot of other witnesses that saw something when that happened. And it seems important to me that this was by a nuclear site. And there were, like, that Tic Tac is something that finally, out of billions and billions of radar returns and everything, is accepted. Well, the ship that got that was the Princeton. And guess who made the Princeton?
Yeah.
Huntington Ingalls at Pascagoula. And so that's very interesting, because they're not only a nuclear site, but they're also an intelligence gathering site. And I think they ought to take those like interactions or close encounters and things like that more seriously. And that's why I was hoping to say something about it. This was an abduction. There might have been some, possibly a second or maybe more than that, abductions near a nuclear site. Plus, it appeared that the object was over a nuclear site. And so I think that's something they ought to pay attention to. If they pay attention to objects over missile sites, well, like most of our missiles, our nuclear missiles now are in submarines. They're not out sitting on sites where somebody can bomb them. And they ought to pay attention to that. And that's what I was trying to say in my book, that this is something significant.
Well, I tell you what, everybody needs to go and read that. And you're available on Amazon, right?
Yeah, it's on Amazon.
And, I really think that this is something that people need to be aware of. And, it's, well, I cannot pull the name up. I can't believe that.
Who?
Your book, your new book.
Oh, Pascagoula, the ultimate close UFO encounter.
Thank you. I just completely lost it sitting here. I'm like, I was just looking at that. There it is. And you guys, you need to go get this. You're going to love it. It's really an interesting case. And the fact that she got to talk to Calvin and Charlie. You interviewed Charlie too, did you?
I interviewed his son.
Right. Sorry. You said that.
Well,
But
yeah, you were really, really impressed by Calvin. What did you talk about?
I was really impressed by Calvin. He was my first person who had those experiences that would, we would talk about it over lunch. He and Wynette and I would have lunch, and for a couple of days. It was just really an interesting experience for me. I loved it. So, and I had the opportunity to interview him later, and twice, I think. And I just thought the world of them. I thought that his perspective was interesting because he really did go into hiding. And when he came out, because people found him, and then, Pascagoula really kind of took him to heart there at the end when he was able to come forward with that information and share it. So I was impressed with him. I was glad to have the opportunity to become his friend and him mine. And Wynette, I think she's brilliant. So they were a storybook couple. They really were, with their love for each other. So that's why I was impressed. I'm impressed with you too. I love your work. I love getting to talk to you, and you're just such a breath of fresh air to bring things out. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
I appreciate you. I appreciate your
I
time.
appreciate you, and thank you very much for having me twice.
There's probably going to be more times if you have time for that later. But well, and for everyone listening, I hope that you've enjoyed this nearly as much as I have. We kind of covered a lot of stuff quickly, and thank you for being here. And if you have any more questions, Dr. Irena Scott is on Facebook. You can find her webpage. You can find her on Amazon. So again, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate every one of you. And we will see you next week. Same cat time, same cat channel. And just remember, Fate Magazine is brilliant. Go get some. You can look at us online. You can get a subscription. You can just enjoy it. So good night. Thanks again.